The goal of Data Transformers podcast is to accelerate digital transformation by bridging the gap between business outcomes and rapidly advancing technologies. And we aim to bridge this gap by focusing on data. I am Peggy Tsai, top 50 women in tech influencer, co-author of the AI book, and data governance expert.
I'm Ramesh Danta, an entrepreneur, a tech blogger, and AI enthusiast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Data Transformers podcast. And today I'm excited to introduce Krishna Cheriath. He is the Vice President and the Head of Digital Data and Analytics at Zoetis. So, Krishna, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
Welcome.
All right. So, Krishna, let's get started with your current engagement at Zoetis. And what is Zoetis? What does it do? And what are your responsibilities at Zoetis as the VP and Head of Data and Digital Analytics?
Yeah, Zoetis is the world's largest animal health company. It had its origins coming out of Pfizer. It used to be a subsidiary of Pfizer, became an independent company in 2013, and since then has been on an amazing journey to reimagine animal health. So when you look at Zoetis, the range of products that we have the traditional medicines, vaccines type of products, but we have diagnostics and an increasing portfolio of digital products and services that benefit both the pet care business as well as the livestock business. It's a global company. We are across multiple companies, and we have a unique opportunity to reimagine animal health with digital and analytics as a lever. And that's what brought me to Zoetis in late October of last year. And my role within the company is to lead the digital data and analytic value creation for our customers as well as for our internal stakeholders. So when I report to our Chief Information and Digital Officer, who reports to our CEO, and the unique opportunity that we have here is that there is a healthy portfolio of AI, digital, diagnostic products that we start with, but we have more opportunities in that space to transform customer journey, the connected care ecosystem in animal health. So that is one aspect. Internally, we have through data and analytics, we have an opportunity to optimize our R&D, optimize sales execution, manufacturing and supply chain. So the opportunity to influence both from a direct value to customers as well as internal optimization brought me here. And that's what the journey that I have undertaken. It is also a case where the ambitions that the company is sky high from a digital data and analytics, as our CEO and the CEO's leadership team reminds me every day. Okay. But we are also on a journey to build out our capabilities, including talent. If you look at our LinkedIn announcements, you'll see new leadership team joining us on our analytic and data digital journey. And then parallelly investing in the right set of data and tech stack to power those analytic and digital ambitions. So excited to be here. And I think we have a unique opportunity to shape, as the largest animal health company in the animal healthcare space, we have a differentiated opportunity to influence digital evolution.
It's really exciting, Krishna, and I've certainly been following your career recently, at least. As a new person, head of analytics, I almost see you as like the chief data officer, and we've talked to other chief data officers on our podcast, and they've shared with us, their first 100 days, their first 90 days, what they've hoped to accomplish, what they're learning. Can you share with us, the audience today, you're within that same time span, what specific things were you looking for when meeting your new colleagues and business stakeholders and partners, and what gaps were you looking to fill? So curious to get that type of mindset and thinking from you.
Yeah, I think it is. It was recently talking to a newly appointed chief data officer for a transportation and logistics company, and we were sharing notes. And I've learned the hard way through my journey as a chief data officer at Bristol Myers Squibb, and then now here, that you have a limited honeymoon period when you come into roles like these. So at Zoetis, I have a chief data analytics officer and head of digital strategy kind of a role. You come in with a lot of political capital, a lot of honeymoon, and a lot of expectations riding on you. And when you come into that role in a non-digitally native company, which has a legacy, a technical debt, a data debt, etc., you have to really focus and put your chips in the right slots, if you will. And the way I think about that is, how do we establish credibility fast by focusing on the differentiated value creating opportunities so that you can build trust and credibility fast, but simultaneously start to think of in some of the longer lead time journeys that you need to undertake to pivot the data and digital fabric of the company in a different direction, which doesn't happen overnight, especially if you or your starting point is not a clean slate as a digitally native company. You have to really build on the backs of what I call the sins of the past. And then that journey it doesn't happen overnight. So it is really a two-track strategy, if you will. On one track, it is establish credible partnerships and with the business leaders across different areas and find those areas where you can demonstrate value fast and build trusted relationships. And at the same time, start to lay out a pragmatic roadmap to evolve the data and digital fabric in a better direction. And that two-speed mode is particularly important. Because I think if one without the other does not help you to advance the agenda. The last thing, and it is something that I shared, it got published in a recently published book called Trust. And the key idea there is that digital data and analytics don't progress in a company without a coalition developing around it. Just by having a digital or data in your title, you're not going to be able to advance it. So you really have to be constantly investing in those, creating that coalition of the willing between business, analytic, technology, and data stakeholders so that you're able to progress it. And which means that somebody like me needs to be equally proficient, leading from the front and leading from behind. And you cannot make it all about yourself. And that is something that I'm always acutely aware of when coming into those roles, because there's a lot of hoopla around you arriving into an organization, this kind of a role. You need to really invest your political capital and chips wisely so that you can build a sustaining coalitions that help you advance.
That's interesting, Sir Krishna. So when you come into an organization, right, you already have this established, the people are there, the processes are there, and some kind of a technology is there. You talked about the technology debt that's already that you're paying because of what's there, right? And then you all have existing processes. So, but one of the challenges, I shouldn't say challenges, but one of the key elements is the people, right? Either people are either consumers of data or the producers of data, or people like you are the enablers of people either consuming or producers, right? So you have three classes of these people. So, but we don't think about data. So when I'm a chief marketing officer, I'm a product manager, I'm not thinking, oh, right. So then how do you ensure, right, as an enabler, that people should be digitally aware, data aware, and then help them, make the decisions using this? I think maybe you talked about something called digital citizen, but can you talk a little bit about the people element of the strategy?
I think two parts to that issue, and it is a real thing that anybody who's in a role that is tasked with advancing data and analytics need to be mindful of. One aspect is traditionally, data organizations have been very guilty about talking a data language and metrics and KPIs that is very material for them, but immaterial for others.
Correct.
If I'm a business leader and I have a P&L accountability and I have a top line to hit, that's what I'm worried about. And if this is helping me do that, great. If not, nice. If I'm data or analytic inclined, I may be of interest, but it is of secondary nature. So I've tried to focus on what I call an iceberg strategy, which is focus on the things that is above the waterline for all of those stakeholders who are in business areas to really talk. Like if I'm talking to somebody in R&D, how can I enable them to accelerate the drug discovery process? How can we help data analytics to optimize drug development? Those kind of topics, and then finding those common areas of value creation. And then it is my job and those with data and technology as a part of it to really translate that into what it means internally. When you talk to a sales and marketing audience focusing on business performance measures, how do you better target customers, those kind of topics, which is really material for their execution. So that's part one. So you need both. Below the waterline in terms of the data technology roadmap, the data foundation, the architecture revolution, analytics and data science built out, AI, ML, all of that is relevant. But it is really important to segment the conversation so that you establish, and you need to be a boundary spanner truly, that you're able to span the boundary between the business strategy and the data analytic and tech strategy, which I envelop under the digital strategy bucket. So that is one part. Second aspect is then, how do you think about elevating the digital quotient in the organization at large? Traditionally, when you come into an organization which is not a digitally native company, the digital becomes and data or analytics becomes the domain of those who have that in their title. But you cannot really achieve material progression if you don't have a wider involvement across the enterprise. So that's where this notion of digital citizenship comes along, which in a way it is like, if you're an employee of Zoetis and you're in effect a digital citizen of Zoetis, and as a digital citizen of Zoetis, there are certain expectations of you and a certain level of awareness that you need to have. So for example, in order to protect the company from cyber risks, it is not just the job of the chief information security officer. Every employee has a role to play. If I get a suspicious email, I need to know what to do. What are some of the basic phishing and scam attempts that I should be aware of? So that is one example. There are other cases that in the data world is particularly relevant is around data quality. So when you think about data quality, you have many organizational elements who are like data stewardship, data management teams who think of data quality as their full-time job. I would argue that you need to make data quality everyone's problem. And so, for example, with the deployment of software as service solutions like Workday in companies, one of the persistent problems across many enterprises is the quality of HR data. Well, it is the responsibility of every manager, every employee to make sure that the data in the HR systems is accurate. It is not just the job of HR or not just the job of data and technology professionals. So how do you help everybody think about their responsibility in their functional context around elevating data quality? So just two examples of things that can be wrapped under the envelope of digital citizen to really talk to the wider audience to say that you all have a role to play. Yeah. So I think of that digital upskilling in kind of two parts. One is the digital citizenship, what everybody should know. Beyond that, it really depends on your role. If you're a leader, it means something different. If you're a SME in manufacturing and supply chain, it means something different, etc. And then thinking in partnership with business areas to really look at what is that we need to drive. So, just to round out that answer, it is really one part is as data analytics professional becoming a proficient boundary spanner and being able to have custom conversations depending on the audience. Yeah. Second is how do you promote a broader conversation in the organization around digital citizenship and other topics.
That's a really great complete answer you gave, Krishna. But as you were talking though, and you and I have a similar background in data management, I'm always curious about who is ultimately evangelizing all these concepts of data citizenship. It certainly goes beyond the chief data officer, because you really have to apply the business problems and be able to say and explain it in a way to every employee how it affects their work and why they should be doing it. So ultimately, who are all the parties involved that should be pushing for global citizenship and digital upskilling that you talked about?
Yeah, I think it cannot be the purview and a singular purview of a chief digital officer or a chief data officer. It just won't sustain an organization that way. I think of digital as a lever in any future job family or job role. It is going to be a critical element among many other aspects of a job role. When you think about that from that perspective, from a competency framework standpoint, then what we need to do really is to partner with organizational development teams in HR, as well as with the business area to make digital uh, a real topic within the competency framework of the various job families within the companies. So what does that mean? It means that instead of having generic conversations around digital, well, if you're a sales rep in the field, what does digital mean and digital acumen mean for that sales rep is fundamentally different from somebody who's on a manufacturing site. Mm-hmm. So how do we build that into the competency for framework, part one? And how do we have the right level of learning agenda that allows employees to progress on that, part two. Part three is how do you build that into your recruitment strategies so that as we think about the future workforce, they're coming into it with and you're evaluating future talent pool also with digital data analytics as a lever. So those are the topics that I'm engaged in conversations within Zoetis right now with our head of HR as well as increasingly business areas to say, how should we think about it? Because in my experience, unless we move forward again with a coalition in this, you can have some short-term wins, but sustainable success would elude us.
That's interesting. So actually in this, while we're talking about the scope, so in the technology world, if let's say somebody is in charge of a CRM, rollout CRM, it's a very clearly defined thing, program. Okay, I rolled out CRM, I rolled out ERP, right? So now you talked about this having a short-term wins so that you keep building your credibility, and then also having a long-term vision, right? So given that long-term is long-term, you are not there to prove that your long-term strategy has been successful. So can you give us some case studies or use cases from your past example? What do you mean by this pragmatic wins that you want to keep building to build your credibility so you can execute on the longer term strategy? It could be from Bristol, it could be from Zoetis, whatever, like things that you could talk.
Yeah, I think it in a recent past, I came into role as a data leader. So I had all of the accountabilities of a chief data officer without the lofty title. And coming into that role, we were moving from a very heterogeneous mix of data organizations across functional areas. And that was the first time we were bringing all of this constituencies under one enterprise data organization umbrella. So going back to the earlier part of following a pragmatic roadmap, it became very clear to us that there is significant evolution needs to be done from an enterprise data landscape standpoint. Okay. But rather than just lead with that, what we did was we led with something called a rapid data lab. The idea behind that was that we wanted to bring together a SEAL Team 6 or a SWAT team of data engineers, data SMEs, and business analysts together, and airlift them into different data and analytic problem situations that the business areas are facing, and deliver value in days and weeks, not months and years, but days and weeks. Yes, we may need to make some compromises in terms of the technology solution and data solution, but we really built for purpose a rapid data lab team, invested behind them so that they don't have to go through project approvals for every piece of work that they do. We started that in the first year with an idea that we want to do around 75 to 100 initiatives of various size. We finished that year with 440.
Wow.
Now, we learned a lot from it, right? To say what are the kind of data challenges that exist, what are the value creation. Some of the use cases we attacked didn't persist beyond an initial value creation. But out of that came two real outcomes. One, you developed much more credible partnerships across the enterprise. So because you're there, you're showing value, you're helping them solve business problems in real time. Second, we developed a very strong understanding of what needs to really evolve in the underlying data and system fabric of the company to make it sustainable. Then the second part, we positioned an enterprise data and analytic engineering team to embark on a multi-year cloud transformation. And we really built an enterprise data lake ecosystem without ever saying the word enterprise or data or lake.
Yeah, okay.
Because I think, the notion is because people are so much fatigued around all of these notions, but we did realize that we have so many data silos that we need to bridge them. So we created the right kind of a reference architecture, technology stack, as well as deciding what is the cloud strategy we want to pursue. But then we talk to each business areas in terms of how do we enable various use cases for them. And whether it is for R&D, whether it is for manufacturing and supply chain, whether it is for sales and marketing or HR, all of those data were platformed into this underlying, quote unquote, enterprise data lake architecture without ever selling an enterprise data lake multi-year program. So I show that as an example of kind of a two-track strategy to say, have a focus to deliver value, build credibility and relationships. You will learn a lot from it through something like a rapid data lab. Simultaneously, you also need a significant focus to really move that forward. The other part that you touched on, which is an interesting angle, is when you look at the technology landscape of a modern company, it is increasingly getting split between a bunch of software as service solutions, multi-cloud, custom fit solutions. It is really not a landscape that enables coherent thinking in terms of data strategy, data architecture, and data standardization. So when you come into a role like mine, you have an accountability to make sure that data and analytics is powering value, but you also have an accountability to partner with other system and business process owners to think also about data architecture, data standards, data quality upfront in implementing an ERP platform or implementing in a human capital platform or a CRM, etc. Because always what happens is this is after the fact. You implement ERP and then think about what analytics use cases can be enabled with ERP data, and then you're always fighting that battle. It's not easy, but that's the other angle that needs to be pursued as well.
Krishna, I mean, every time I listen to you talk, I learn a lot, for sure. And it sounds like you have a vision. There's certainly certain concepts to executing this strategy. I'm just curious whether you think this is a formula that can be applied to any industry, or when working in healthcare, what parts of this strategy have you tailored specifically to the healthcare industry? I'd love to be able to dissect some of those differences.
Yeah, I think this part of my recent passion has been teaching part-time at Carnegie Mellon, where I teach in the executive education program, and the audience is aspiring CIOs and CDOs. Recently, I was teaching for a course for the U.S. Army, an interesting stakeholder group there as well. Well, what I talk there is that I think the generic formula around making sure that you're value focused, making sure that you're really taking the mindset of how do we move the stakeholders to a point of consensus around these topics through the right size conversations is relevant for everybody. So I think the generic formula is, I think, industry agnostic and domain agnostic. But where you need to be really proficient at is in how do you engage different audience, especially in a healthcare setting. If I take a pharma organization, if you take an R&D organization in pharma, these are really deep, multi-PhD, computational researchers, advanced data science at the cross section of biology, computer science, and analytics. And so the kind of conversations you need to have with them is fundamentally different from a stakeholder group, let's say in sales and marketing and brand managers and those with P&L accountability, or those in finance, etc. So the custom fitting to the industry comes in to say, and this is the hardest part that analytic teams and data science leaders have to solve for us, because you need a combination of talent who can understand that business process context and can have that business conversation, can translate that into quantitative problem statements and data analytic problem statements that you can work and solve for, and then the storytelling, and to make sure that the stakeholders understand what they can and cannot do with the insights that you're gleaning from it. Now, that is a unicorn combination if you have a lot of times to bridge that. So I think the custom fitting comes in from the making sure that you're able to address to your company's business context, your legacy, the DNA of the company, the culture of the company, as well as the various business units and the organizational reality of the company. So yes, a generic model in terms of making sure that you're acutely value focused, really focused on stakeholder engagement, focus on spending your honeymoon period on value creation and credibility build out, but equally be focused on a long-term strategic roadmap. Those are relevant across industries, I would argue. But you need to custom fit depending on the company situation.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard today and would like to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite player like iTunes and Spotify. And please do rate our podcast. Also, please go to our website, www.datatransformerspodcast.com, for more episodes, blogs, and information on our speakers. Thank you.